And boom! Hello, everybody. This is Jackson Daniel. I'm the host of Aesthetic Conversations, and this is that with aesthetic talk with aesthetic people. And tonight I have one of my favorite stand-up comedians on the planet. He's super tall. He's super goddamn funny. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brock Wilbur. I'm a guy that uh, has done comedy for a long time and then has stopped doing comedy to do political activism and is now going back to comedy soon.
Okay, cool. Shit, I was actually meaning to ask that. Because I'd asked you
Right.
probably about a year ago if you still did comedy because I've been dying to see you. So what exactly have you been doing in politics?
So this is a comedy and growing up have coincided with me, where I got into comedy at the age of 28, which is I had somebody in my life that I went to college with who fuck their advice. What a dumb piece of shit they were. But they were like, hey, if you haven't sold a giant Hollywood script by the age of 30, no one will ever take you on, and you should just put a gun in your mouth and die forever. And I was just like, well, that's a lot. So for my 28th birthday, I recorded my first comedy special after only being in comedy for a year. And my impetus in joining when I started comedy was that my very first show was main stage at the Comedy Store on the Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, which is it is some pressure. But what I saw as I did bringer shows and the big level stuff was that these guys would come out every night and they would do the same 7 minutes that they'd done for the last decade. And I was just like, well, that's weird, especially
Same
if these shows
material?
are your what's up?
Same material?
Yeah, the exact same, word for word, the exact, they had their seven and they just fucking did that and nothing else. And when you're doing early shows and they're bringer shows and your friends have to come out and buy tickets to come out, I was like, well, between a ticket, parking, and the 2-drink minimum, it's costing my buddies $60 to come see me. So if they're coming back to back weeks, I'm gonna have a different 7 minutes every time at least, just to not waste their time. And that meant that very quickly I was like, oh, I have an hour of material. Weird. In the vein that my heroes like Patton Oswalt and stuff did the sort of thing where once a year, or Louis C.K., they'd record their hour, kill it, and then start from scratch again the next day. I was like, well, why don't I do the same thing too? Even though it was my first year was my first year stuff, I listened to it again recently, and it isn't even really stand up. It's mostly just stories I would tell at a drinking party with buds. It's here's a wacky thing.
That's literally what I've always loved about your stand up is it seems more like a drunken ramble, and that's how I've always seen. Well, people always said that that's where I was funniest, is not necessarily even writing shit, is just organically, and that's what I've always loved about your shit, is it does seem. It really does have the vibe that you're just doing it on the spot. You had a bit and then you went on a tangent in between it and then you're like, oh fuck, what was I saying? Okay, back to this.
Which I mean, so much of it is there is I would have sent you ahead of this the Google Doc picture I still have of what the set list was, which wasn't word for word, but was what if you talked about this, but then came back to this maybe, and it's I don't know. I hope I can stick to that, and never did. It has always been fun and interesting, but doing that sort of material burn year after year very early in my career meant that I had to get better really fucking fast, because day one of year two, I'd made a promise to myself to never bring up any of the old stories, and there is a part of my life that has always existed that since I was in grade school, people have been that thing that you're talking about that happened to you, that's bullshit. And I'm just no, I have one of those lives that seems to be a magnet for nonsense, or at the very least, I am always very perceptive about the nonsense around me. I'm can you fucking believe that that's happening? And everyone else is I don't see what that is. It's really, I think we should be focusing more on this thing that seems fucking weird. And everyone else is like, I don't know, it's just Tuesday. And so it feels like I have an unending font in that way of like, there is always material to do, but like where it goes is interesting and like needs to have a purpose.
Well, you picked the right profession to do it, and especially with especially how you do your styles. Politics, I'm sure also has its whole entire wave of different comedic things. So is the new album that you're going to be doing going to be a lot of political? Because you've never really stood in that area. Because I think in a lot of ways when it comes to politics comedy, it's kind of easy unless you do it in a specific way. Because it's like, well, I got a couple hours on Donald Trump. Oh, well, so does everybody fucking else. You know what I mean? So are you going to be doing it in a political way?
To harken back to like the sort of like Patton Oswalt bootlegs and stuff that I grew up with, and like the early like comedians of comedy tour stuff, like that stuff like in like 2003 meant so much to me because it was like, oh wow, this like adult man said that he wished that like demons would fuck George Bush in the ass.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's so important and edgy, and it's important that I know that. And like, but like to listen to it now, it is none of it ever ages well. But there are things that can be political that are universal and will always be there. And I think anything that stands up towards like fascism or like the sort of the parts of our country that like proclaim to be religious and there's no connection to any of the religious values, or proclaim to be like we're on the side of a certain set of people that they definitely aren't, like the disconnects are always funny, and disconnects will always be universal because we live in a country that will always have the exact same disconnects. 20 years from now, anything I say about that will always be about that. But
yeah,
I'm not like doing like I'm not like prepping like an anti-Trump album. I'm not doing Rock Against Bush for anybody. I think that like there is a very anything that you can say about that on that scale that you can be like, wow, like that person and their beliefs are disconnected. I feel like I have a person in my life that is already just that. And if I rail against like Greg, like that's more interesting to rail against Greg, and Greg can be forever. Like right. Trump will die and be gone, but Greg can be here 30 years from now. We can all keep shitting on Greg. So okay. Like that's maybe closer to it.
Okay, I get what you mean. Definitely in the sense of when you look back and reflect on the old pits that you're talking about with Patton Oswalt and stuff like that, by nowadays context, it sort of turns into edgelord shit. Like the I wanting George to be raped by demons and stuff like that. That is more just like a, wow, look at you for saying that. Whereas, right. It's not more of a reflection where you're like, that's just still a really good bit. And that was the one thing I was going to ask you is, in your entire career, even if it wasn't recorded, is there one in particular that you wish you could simply reuse because you're like, God damn it, that was good. Like, son of a bitch. I wish could, because I'm so proud of this bit in particular. You know what I mean? You have that piece of material that even if it's one thing that you keep plugging that nobody laughs, you're like, why does nobody laugh at this as hard as I think it fucking is?
There isn't a specific thing, but there is a specific feeling, which has been that like I talked about, like day one of year two, like I recorded my special like the day before I was on somebody's show, and I was like, okay, today is all new stuff. And I've always written new stuff, but I was just like fucking tired from recording an hour and a half from the night before. I didn't know what to do. And I got up on stage and I just had nothing. And there was an audience staring at me. And in my pit of my stomach, I was like, I know that I have some things I can say that will make them laugh, but violate my own rule. And that is a thing that comes up sometimes as like a panic moment, especially like in front of like a club crowd where I'm like, yeah, I got like these real deep cuts about like a Thomas Pynchon novel or like House of Cards or something. And like, they're like, no, none of us know what that is.
Yeah.
Talk about Kevin James or talk about how women are fat or something. And you're like, okay. I know I have something in me that would connect here, but I don't want to let them have that. And that has been so part of my last couple of years of my career here have been that I moved to Kansas City because Kansas City is a place straddling two deep red states where I think that my wife and I can do work that matters politically in a way that what we were doing in Los Angeles didn't matter. But that means that I am now ingrained very, very far into the Midwest comedy scene. And like when I got here, I met a bunch of people that were like, oh, I've got like your albums. Like, this is so cool. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, we're going to build like a cool scene and we're going to do cool stuff. And then I started doing shows with some of them. And like the material was very like 1990s Tim Allen, like women in the kitchen, awooga stuff. And I was just like, well, it is the opposite of that other feeling where I was like, I have something that can make people laugh. I was on stage and was like, I heard what people were laughing at earlier, which was like racist and sexist and sucked shit. I actually don't want to tell the jokes that I think will make them laugh because I don't think these people deserve it. And that caused me to have like about a year off of like time to reevaluate, like, who am I doing comedy for? Where is it going? Like, what is the idea of the comedy that I want to do and who do I want to perform
That's a wild
with? Which is
doing it at like the age of your career, you know what I'm saying? Usually by then you solidify the roots in exactly what people are getting with the Brock Wilbur experience. But now you're having to be like, do I stay to this or do I have to pander to a specific crowd because this is where the fuck I'm at? You know what I mean? Like,
well, the wake up for that was also like, I think what I get to do when I tell the story of like what my comedy career has been is that I got to rise very fast and then I got to tour the country. And what comes with touring the country is that you decide to be one of two people. And I've been on cross-country tours with where I was opening for two different kinds of people. And one was to open for a guy like who I think I've been in the past, who is just a nonsense party machine. So it was just like, okay, so every day we're going to get to a new city. We're going to find a bar that's open at noon. We will drink, we will find drugs, we will hit on people, we will somehow do words for 45 minutes at night, and then we will repeat the cycle the next day in a different part of Indiana. I don't know. And then like I also went on a tour with somebody who was a much bigger comedian, but was also like a few years older and sober. And so our cross-country tour was like, every time we got to a city, it was like, what do we do today? Where's the museum? And that was about it. Like, we could just go to the museum because we aren't going to bar. And like both of the two extremes at some point, I was like, I actually don't want to do either of these. I would like to see some culture and maybe have a beer and then not be addicted to anything or trying to die. And that was around the time that I met the woman that is now my wife, and it is one thing to suddenly be married to somebody and be like, you know what, I have a responsibility to not OD on the road, and that changes your priorities in terms of how much it matters to be out doing stand-up for no money.
I get that. No, I totally understand that. I'm glad you're doing it though, and I'm really stoked for the album, and I really do hope you stick to your niche, because like what you're talking about with also having to toss out a joke that people might not understand. I definitely identify with that when you go on the tangent about Tim Kasher, because there is only a handful of sad fucking people my age, because in my opinion, Domestica is one of the best albums of all goddamn time. So when I heard you going on about like,
you're fucking right.
I literally was like, this man, because I listened to Nightmare Fuel and I listened to Crime Travel tons of times. And when I finally listened to 28, I couldn't believe it. And that was when I was like, Brock Wilbur is my messiah. He is the shit. Like, I just was I let myself over to you and was like, okay, he is the shit, because he is rambling about the album that has literally gotten me through every breakup, even my divorce. And I was like, and he's talking about the man that made it. And I was like, all right, this guy's a shit. But you know what I mean? With having to, that's a hard.
But that is also, as previously described, just like that would be a conversation you and I should have had at a party when we both acknowledged that, like, oh, hey, we're both wearing cursive shirts. And instead
Yeah.
I did that in front of 100 people.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
I was
There's gonna
talking
be
about. And
one
they're like,
person that's gonna
I get
stop
what
you
you're
after
saying,
the
but
set.
like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So do you like? I guess are you still gonna stick to that kind of style of like fuck it? The one kid in a Misfits t-shirt that meets me after the show and tells me I get it. Hey man, just so you know I get it. That's still worth it at this point.
I that question comes up from people is like, what matters more to you? Is it to do something that like connects with people, or to do something that connects with one random person out of nowhere? And I think that the more you do comedy, the more you find a way to bridge the two. Like if I were to do the Tim Kasher bit today, I think I would be able to explain like what the ugly organ is in a sentence or two in a way that like the room would understand before I said it. And instead I'm just like,
that's a good idea.
I was on LSD and there was sand everywhere and I was yelling the words and then he was sad and everyone's like, what is this supposed to mean? I don't know. So
yeah, okay, like sure. That I'm guessing this is a rapper of some sort. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we'll just. But and then there's a whole. Is it interesting to think about the world that people create in their minds behind the idea of what concept they're trying to create? Like, do you think about that?
Oh,
Like,
God.
I wonder what the joke means to them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think I get that from like when I like. Probably the easiest version is like then a year later asking like my mom or my dad like, what do you think that meant? What did that story mean to you?
That's
did
a
you
fair
think that I was a musician? Well, tell me about you. I don't know anything about you, and we're doing your show.
Well, that's interesting. I am 26 years old. I really want to be a stand-up comedian, but I went to an open mic in my town. I live in Dubuque, Iowa, and the open mic was they do it every Monday, and I had finally gone up there, and I didn't have a set, but I had a bunch of bits that could probably roughly estimate around 10 minutes, and but I was like, you have to sign the thing, and I didn't realize that, so there was like 12 people ahead of me. I didn't have enough time, but I also hesitated because I don't want to sound edgy, but I listened to everybody's material, and I realized that my shit was way more. I was hoping that shit would be like gritty and offensive.
Sure.
And nothing compared to anything as close as what I was gonna do. And I got like a little like panic. I was like, oh, and also I was mentioning the fact that I have one joke in particular where I told an Asian woman, just full disclosure, that I was gonna Hiroshima her pussy, and there was 4 Asians in the crowd, so I was very concerned. I was like, like
right.
One of them was a comedian. I was like, he might laugh at that. However, he did open his set by saying, I usually don't dive into racial material, and I was like, oh fuck, like I was like, damn it, like so yeah, I do want to do stand-up eventually once I get a good set list going.
Good standard to set the room. Yeah, so it is. That is so many different layers of difficult. Which first of all, like you have the right impetus, which is that like my favorite thing from doing open mics early in my career was that I wound up, instead of like writing my own material, I was just writing tags for other people's stuff. So I was like, get me up on the stage right now because I want to like follow up that person's joke with like a better punchline, or I want to say like, when you said that thing, actually, like for me, it was like this, and I was just like, these are better than the jokes I actually came here with. So if you're starting from that place, but there's also that difficult reading of the room temperature thing. And I had I don't want to out the guy. I don't want to share his name, but there was somebody that reached out to me like a year or so ago via like email. And he was like, hey, I'm in a college town. I've been going to open mics. I've been trying to get into stand-up. And I am doing the sort of stand-up that I enjoy from the people I consider my heroes. And some of that is not deliberately edgy to be edgy, but like I know that stand-up should be pushing a boundary somewhere. And so I've said stuff. And he was like, I did 2 mics and I've been banned from the only mic in my town. Like everyone.
That's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about. I genuinely am worried because I gave some of the bits to my girlfriend. Right. That doesn't count. And then I've told some of my people at the bar who seem to be pretty open-minded to shit. they didn't laugh. The only joke they laughed at was, I want to do all this horrible shit, and at the end of my set, be like, do you ever wonder if in reincarnation and that baby birds are actually sex addicts when they get spit in their mouth by their mothers? And that just have a dumb, like, cutesy little joke at the end. And they said that was the best one. And I was like, really? That was the best one? That's supposed to be my dumb.
So your closer was that baby birds do cum swapping.
Yes, but not.
Right on.
But
Okay.
it's not supposed to come out that vulgar. It's supposed to be like a dumb, almost Mitch Hedberg style joke. You know, that because, you know, the fact that Mitch Hedberg's jokes only worked because it was Mitch Hedberg saying it. If you had some other regular dude talk like, hey, dogs are forever in the push-up position, you'd be like, the fuck are you talking about? It was because Mitch Hedberg talked the way he did that made it funny. You know what I mean? Like,
right, yeah.
It takes a certain set, like, tone to do stuff. So that was the whole point, is just to do a dumb joke at the end of a bunch of horrible shit and see what happens. So I'm gonna do it. I don't care, but I am concerned that they might, like, because it's like I have some material that's meant for these type of people that'd be down there, kind of hipstery kids, and then some shit that's like, you know.
Well, does what you write make you laugh?
Unfortunately, I fucking piss myself laughing. Like I
okay.
So
that's A. If it's passing that test, that's most of it. Then what comes next is like, is it worth it to say this? Like, what percentage of people do you think will enjoy it versus what percentage of people will like if you have a joke that you think genuinely will hurt somebody, obviously not. Like, that's probably the cutoff point. That is a difference between like pushing people's envelope versus just like pain. Like that's a weird line you have to exist
too. There's nothing in the tone in which I tell them to. There's nothing malevolent behind it. It really does sound like some, I don't know. Like, I'm just a dumb kid. Like, I mean, because the whole entire basis, because I want to, like, because I'm not good with segues, but I want to have the entire premise of it in the beginning. I talk about how you think you're a good person, but then these thoughts come out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, maybe I'm a shitty person, because you think like, oh, there's an old lady coming through the door. Of course I'll hold that door open. You know, that's an action, and that you should be based off your actions. But you also shouldn't, you can't necessarily always hold yourself accountable, because you just think something up and you're like, oh shit, why did I think? Fuck, why did I think that? Hold on, god damn it. Am I this person? Am I the person? And you're not. But that's the whole premise of the entire stand-up bit, is dumb thoughts.
Well, what I like about that is that, like, you have like you're saying that like what you should do, and like what the dark idea is, and I think what you have to do is identify like what the in between is. It's like, hey, did you know that like an entire generation of us raised on like itchy and scratchy cartoons, like in the back of our heads there'll always be this in place that's like, what would happen if like violence happened to a grandma in this moment? And you're like,
right,
like, that is not your fault to think that, and that is what you're thinking. You have to have somebody to blame that on, because if you just say like, oh, like, my thought is like, what if something terrible happened here? Then to the audience it sounds like, is he a sociopath? Nope. But if you're like, I think we're all on the same boat, that we could all, like, you know, for a split second. We
all watch Itchy and Scratch.
We love cartoons.
I'm stealing that.
We love cartoons. It's there.
Okay, I'm totally stealing that. Like, okay, right. Really? That's just like, okay, I don't want to spoil the whole set, but yeah, it's, I guess, right. And also I want to have the reflection of the crowd, because there's one point where another Asian-related joke, and I'm going to even bring it up, I'm like, no particular reason why, but just so happens, another Asian-related joke. One time, my son has Prader-Willi syndrome, and I'm going to lead up the joke with this. Prader-Willi syndrome means, if you know what that is, the primary thing of it is that the hemisphere of his brain that responds to satiation and feeling full is non-existent, so he's always hungry. You know that painful feeling you get in your stomach? Like when you're like, I need to eat something or I'm going to fucking vomit. Right. He feels like that all the time. And one day, I was cooking, and I gave him a serving of rice. Like rice and meat and stuff like that, and he wanted more, and he started going, I want rice, and blink, I went, yeah, you and the rest of the kids in North Korea. And I meant it in the way like, kids in North Korea are hungry. You shouldn't be so selfish. You got to eat. But it sounds like I'm being a terrible person. And when the crowd goes, oh, I'm going to go, oh, really? Well, fucking adopt one then. All right? Like, don't give me shit. You're not being a part of the solution. Don't write a check. Don't fucking moan and groan at me, you dicks. Like,
what you have there is that you have such a specific and fascinating disease that, like, even just explaining it is funny and interesting because, like, I've never heard of that before. I'm like, that opens up things. But also, the idea that you taking care of somebody as, like, just like a general parental frustration would say things that are ostensibly, like, sort of humanitarian, like, think of North Korea, but to a child, like, uh, that's so interesting to be like, I'm so frustrated that I said something that is both true but a war crime. Like, yeah, I have to, like, it sounds like the common thread here of, like, every joke that you're talking about that the audience is turning against you about is that actually you need to present them with a different target for their anger, which is not you. It is some sort of cultural influence. It's like, look, I did this and I said this. Here's why that's not my fault.
okay.
And it feels like they would come with you on that journey,
well, that
because
was
you have reasons.
Well, like, I have shitloads of stuff about don't be a goddamn parent. I have a rant about how I think the government should give you a tax break if you get a vasectomy, the same as if you have a child. You know what I mean?
I love that. That is a legitimately good idea, and I agree.
100%. And that's a real thought I had one day where I was like, why do you get $6,000 back in your taxes for having a kid? And I am a parent and I love my fucking tax return. However, it is horseshit that I get this because I did nothing to fucking earn this. But I will take it every goddamn.
If we could all get, like, double money back for just making sure that there are half as many white men moving forward, perfect.
That's what I'm saying.
Good system.
Like, seriously, yes. Like, Stanhope had a bit a while ago where he's just like, he called it incentive-based eugenics, and he's just like, offer up redneck prize, like free bow hunting with Ted Nugent. And he's like, you tell me I cut off my balls, I get to go crossbow hunting with the Nuge, and they're like, no, you don't get your balls off the chop. Fuck yeah, I cut off my balls right now. Like, and I heard that after I had this thought, and for some reason hearing Doug Stanhope solidified my idea that it was something good. But yeah, so that's what I'm working with. But I'm definitely going to take that redirection of where their anger should derive. That's really brilliant. Okay.
Also, that idea is a great closer then to be like, hey, I've said some problematic and shitty things here. Do you know what would stop somebody from having these ideas? It's if there were fewer men like me, and here's how I think we could do it. And, like, that would be a great way so that even if the audience has turned against you, they could be like, you know what? That guy should not reproduce, and I am in favor of it.
Sweet. Let's go out and abort this baby we're about to have. We don't know if it's going to be the next Jackson Daniel. All right, fuck it. Which that would be. I don't know. I don't know. Like, that's something I'd probably carry in some sort of a laminated tag. I cause an abortion because of my stand-up. Like, it's, you know, it's like my goal to cause suicides through my old emo band because I think it would give us really good publicity. Like, you know.
That's every emo band. We're all there.
Absolutely. Speaking of emo bands, and since we're going to go into emo bands, but first, Domestica or Ugly Organ? Which one do you think is better?
Oh, Ugly Organ.
You think so?
Oh, that's my jam.
Let me hear why, in your personal opinion.
It's difficult because both are concept albums, and any concept album gets a go-ahead for me, and, like, most Cursive albums, I suppose, are concept albums. But the addition of a cello and a keyboard, that fucks for me. Nothing could fuck more. And also, like, that was at the exact same time that the Faints Wet from Birth used the exact same cello player on their string stuff. So when they toured together, and then she left both bands and became an NPR correspondent out of New York, but is back on tour with Cursive right now, which I'm just like, I love that you can just, like, tour with a band for a few years and then be like, I'm at NPR now. I do serious stories, but also whenever they want to go back on tour, I can go fucking back on tour and I can
Get the
party.
fuck
It's the dream gig.
I already love that you're a tome of random nonsense fucking fun fact information that is only applicable to incite the joy of a person like me who can also tell you the entire lineup of the metalcore band Attack Attack lineup from fucking when they started to when they ended. And everyone's like, why get this information? I'm like, because I did this instead of learning how to teach, or instead of teaching my kid to read. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is the information I spent my time learning. But to each their own. Now, yeah, all right. When it comes to music, if you had to pick 3 most influential bands, what would they be?
Oh, I think the first 3 albums that I bought with my own money were all Beck albums, so that goes on there.
Oh shit.
Radiohead's OK Computer led me to be like, I need to get a guitar, and then that led me into the rest of Radiohead. And you know what? We'll go left field here. The thing that taught me to be angry was the entirety of the Blood Brothers. Let's just do that.
Oh, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, like, cause Greatest Fucking Hits was my jam when I was in fucking. Just so the chaoticness of it was just absolutely fucking phenomenal.
I remember being in college and like, between 2 shows when they came to Chicago, I actually like went vegan because even at 19, I was like, I'm not skinny enough to be at this concert. Like I need a white belt. I need it to fit me, and I need it to be 3 sizes smaller than what I have right now. That
was the trend, dude. You had slightly baggy pants, a shirt that didn't fit you, no matter if you were 104 pounds. You had to find the slimmest t-shirt you could find, and then you had a sweatband of a fucking MTV television show. You know what I mean? Like, it was great times, dude.
Great times.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we sort of branched off into comedy.
That's all right.
So what exactly what side do you lean on politically?
Oh, I'm a leftist, but I'm a humanist, and I just want people to have their rights. That's all I'm fighting for.
Fair enough. I never argue about politics because I, like most people, ironically, who argue about politics, don't know anything about politics. So I usually shut the fuck up. So if anybody's like, did you know that fucking Obama during the administration did this? I'm like, maybe, I don't fucking know. Oh, did you know that Trump did this today? I'm like, maybe, I don't fucking know. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's just like the world of like Marvel and comic books is the same as the political side.
Because like a Marvel DC thing is an Obama Trump thing. That is a bit you should do.
People try to act like they know way more about it than they fucking actually do. You know what I mean? Like, watching the Avengers movies doesn't give you a firm grasp on the entire Marvel universe, you dicks. Like, just because you know the main characters doesn't mean you know shit about the fucking obscure X-Men, you know?
Right.
But, so I guess I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe it. So what have you been doing specifically to advocate your beliefs and the side that who are you voting for this year if you had to have a candidate? I thought Yang was cool. Asian president, hell yes.
You know what? I was really. What is interesting about 2019 is, especially in like a primary year, it is genuinely the marketplace of ideas. It was 30 people, and like you're like, okay, everyone brings something to the table. And the interesting part about it is, in its best version, people bring things to the table that push things smarter and better, and then even if they drop out, everyone else winds up taking their things on. So like Julian Castro brought up something about like the border and like the laws there, and everyone else has adopted that. Like, okay, that's cool. Andrew Yang felt like that to me too. I was like, you know what? I know that Yang Gang is stupid, just like the Mike Gravel kids aren't doing anything, but Andrew Yang has a couple of ideas that is like, I wish that they would outlive him, and I wish that they would wind up on the platform because they are genuinely good and push us forward towards something. So I'm glad that he's still around. And
I don't think he has a chance. It's just like Cory Booker came to my bar randomly. Now, the interesting thing is, yeah, we're a population of I don't even know how many. It's a city. It's like a college city, but it's not that huge. I didn't know he was a big deal. I thought he was some local politics dude. So I ended up taking a picture doing peak checks with him, going like, and then I saw him on an episode of Parks and Rec and realized, oh, he's a bigger deal than I thought.
I love there was an episode of Parks and Rec, like not the news, but like less.
Yeah, no, it was Parks and Rec that I was like, this is some genuine shit right here. Yeah, I swear to God on everything. And he was cool as shit. Like I'd never heard about him before. He was an incredible public speaker, and the fact, like, he was incredible. He really, really was. He was everything like a good political speaker should hit. Where he went from being hilarious to, somebody asked about what they would do with the American involvement over in Israel, and he immediately became very, very empathetic and very benevolent. Like, he was really good. I'll give it to him.
He's a smart guy, and in 15 years, he will really matter.
You think so?
Probably. Like, that's his time. It's not now.
How old is he?
Oh, he's super young. He's like 40.
Oh, I was about to say, yeah, that was my assumption of why nobody could give a fuck about him. Which, how old is Yang?
Yang is mid-40s, but like, this is his time. I don't think he'll come back to this again, but he should play a part in other things. Like, he's smart enough to do good somewhere.
You think so?
He's one of those people that I'm like, if it was my presidency, he would be on my cabinet somewhere, not at the top, but like in this, like, you're my cabinet secretary of cryptocurrency.
Yeah,
like you're my Bitcoin guy, and you're.
I don't want to get rid of you because I really do think you're cool as shit. But it's like having him on, you want to have him on your entourage, but you don't necessarily want him to be speaking for you, like.
Well, and his idea that there be a universal basic income and that like everyone get $1,000 to $1,500 a month would fix their lives. Like, Alaska does that already because that's just what they do with all their oil money, and people in Alaska are having a pretty good time with that. Like, that's really helped them. Like, debt in Alaska is way the fuck down, and so you like look at that and you're like, he's not wrong. And I feel like he never points to that and says like, did you know we're already kind of doing it and it works? The thing I'm saying is not insane. I'm not talking about socialism. Like, I'm saying like, do the thing that we've already seen works for one state.
Right. I think he did in the Joe Rogan, which is where I heard about him. Was I just accidentally listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with him? He mentioned it, but he definitely didn't advocate that like very much. I think Joe is the one that brought it up. So yeah, you do have a good point with he's not using prime examples.
Right.
Which is what any political debate is about, is just using source information, or any good debate rather.
He seems like a guy that has a couple of really good ideas and has no idea how to sell them. And like, if he was somebody else's vice president and was just like here with like, hey, here's like this thing, like half the ideas are good and half the ideas are like, here's just some like fucking Reddit nonsense that means nothing to anybody. But like between the two, there is a net positive there. His supporters are weird, and the way that he is continuing is weird, and like no one takes him seriously. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's his fault for not being able to do exactly what you talked about. Like, if he was on Joe Rogan and didn't open with, "I want to give everyone money," then he's wrong.
Well, that was a primary talk or whatever, because I mean, I when I heard about it, I mean, like I said, I don't argue any sort of political thing because I'm like, I don't know the facts, I don't know the information. I'm not gonna, like, with so many people where it's like, well, I saw this Facebook meme, so this is my automatic opinion on something, and I'm like, somebody could literally just say like Gandalf back in 1812 is the one who, did, like, Black Reconstruction was really based around Saruman, like they could just literally say some shit like that and people would be like,
really good line, actually.
Yeah, literally, you could just say some shit like that, like, and people would be like, they hold that as a religion, and it's so incredible to me, the things I've seen people bring up and I'm like, that's, it's not true. That's not true. Like, what? Like, you've been lied to. Like,
right.
So, what would your opinion be? Would you believe in a super young president? How would that be to you? What if a guy super young come out of the blue and was like, "Hey, I'm 35 and I want to be the president," but he actually had a bunch of good ideas. I don't
Oh,
think.
absolutely. No, like the age is nothing there. No one cares.
Well, I mean, it seems like everyone would basically toss him aside because I don't know. There's that weird thing. Like I have a rant actually in another bit that I'm going to go on about why I hate old white people. And
Okay.
the number one thing I hate about them is when they like to constantly bring up the fact that they worked their entire life and you should respect them for that. And I always say to them, "Oh, you mean that thing you do if you don't want to be homeless? Oh, you
Right.
you deserve respect for that? You can't. And you're giving me shit at my job while I'm trying to do the exact same thing that you're fucking standing on a pedestal for." Um,
Right.
yeah, and then they always follow it up with yeah, you don't know shit, you're young. So it's a constant irritant in my life, especially living in Dubuque, Iowa.
That happens.
Abs-
I have family members that left college and they went to Iowa in like the 70s, and their first job out of college was to like run a pizza place or something. And so in their minds, like you can have a minimum wage job and then within 10 years you own like a business and then you own multiple houses, and it is that pull yourself up by the bootstraps ideology.
Mhm.
But those like same boomers are now on like Facebook, and like whenever I talk about like, we need a $20 per hour minimum wage and things like that, they're like, well, back in my day we just worked for it. And it's like, well,
Yep.
but you don't know how the cost of living has impacted versus the way that people make money.
Yeah.
And like your generation really fucked us over. So like it is that same thing. It is
That's the only thing
this
I
idea
know.
that like it's disconnected in that way. Like old white people think like, well, if you just put in a day's work, you'd all be rich. And it's like, well, no one could do that if they had 10,000 lifetimes at this point. Like that's just how capitalism functions.
Well, I don't understand how they also don't have grandchildren and they don't look at them being like, "Hey, Billy, how's it been?" It's like, well, I got done with my shift at Pizza Hut and then I went over to my shift at the Dollar Tree and I'm having to get on a Lion Energy assisted payment plan. Well, why? You have two jobs. And it's like, because it doesn't fucking matter. Do you understand how much my rent is? My rent is 2/3 my fucking income monthly, you dick. Like, I can't afford it. Like, what do you mean you can't afford power? I can't afford power. Like, it's as simple as that. Well, what'd you spend your money on? On half the fucking power bill, you cunt. Like, and that's what I don't understand how they don't understand
On being alive, I don't know. At some point, they're going to charge me for oxygen. Who knows how
oxygen.
this is going?
I don't fucking doubt it. But yeah, that's the only thing when it comes to politics, and I don't even know that because it's not even statistical analysis. It's just living as a fucking full custody single parent for forever with a
Right.
kid with disabilities. And I've been very fortunate to the programs I've gotten on, but at the same time, I've been like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, and they're like, well, you do this. I'm like, okay, I'm doing that, but it's not working. So what do I do? And God
I
forbid.
feel like we have ended your podcast by being as dark and sad as this can get. How do
Well,
you want to
I
end
was
it
hoping
in
to
a
get
more
this,
positive way?
motherfucker. I've been saying stand up for a fucking while, and so we'll switch it up to something a little bit more to look for people to learn about you. So you mentioned Oswald. If you had to pick three stand up comedians that not only inspired you, but you had to tell somebody, hey guys, this is who you need to listen to understand where I come from, and also to get a good grip of what good stand up comedy is constructed by. Would Oswald be one of them?
Oswald's absolutely one of them. Jackie Cation is
Hmm.
fucking great at what she does. Jackie does. So a thing that we were hinting towards earlier, which was like, how do you talk about politics in comedy? Is that there is just a fucking wave of clap if you agree comedy albums lately. Is it is different than being like, oh, SJWs and their social things. Like, no, it's not that. It is just like somebody being like, I think we can all agree that like, and then everyone claps, and that's the end of the joke. And you're like, but you forgot to ever do comedy there. Jackie Cation is somebody that takes on a lot of things that matter, from politics, like halfway, and then the other half is like playing D&D with all of our friends. And so like between the two, like it is the exact same joke structure. And so it's like, okay, like you never notice when you're blending the two. And then I think Matt Bronger. Matt Bronger is just
Matt
like
Bronger is the absolute shit. Did you listen to
the
his Amazon special? I haven't got to listen to it yet. I think it's in Portland.
Yes, I interviewed him for it about. You can read it on Paste. We had a really good back and forth on that. It is.
Is he taller than you?
He is 2 inches shorter than me. It's very important to ask that.
You fucking Sam Squatch. Jesus God in heaven.
It is. It's so interesting for him to talk about Portland because Portland has become the place where a lot of alt-right Nazi shit has risen up over the last few years. And so he was like, I have to find a way to talk about that in a funny way. And he does. And that's interesting for somebody who is otherwise non-political, but had to acknowledge like, this is a special about Portland, and to not talk about this being part of Portland would be a mistake. So yeah.
That's gonna make it when I actually do watch it a lot. I'm gonna have to pay attention to that a lot more. Holy shit, that's so cool that you interviewed him. That's one person that I've been meaning to, because to get this podcast started, dude. Like I just one day had this idea in my head that I was like, there's a lot of people with Instagram followings. There's a lot of Instagram stars and YouTube stars, and all of them love having their ego stroked, and they don't get interviewed. And they really do have cult followings of up to like millions of fans. So I figured to myself, why not interview these people? Then so like their fans get to like see them a little bit more about them. Not to mention I could get to interview my idols. And so right. I just started inboxing people, and surprisingly, everyone's been really cool about it. For fitness people, I went to their email about personal training and pretended I was trying to get personal training, and then I was like, hey, you want a fucking interview?
Oh my God, that's so great.
Isn't it funny? Yeah, I like lied to them, and I was like, so it's $70 a month? Hey, you're trying to do this podcast? I only have like 800 followers, but you'll really be making my dream come true. Help me pop this cherry. Come on! And some of them have been pretty fucking cool about it. Some of them have not responded whatsoever. But they'll come around.
Right.
That's my goal. They'll come around fucking eventually. Once I have like 2,000 followers, then they'll bite their tongues on the mistake that they had once made. That's my goal.
Well, this was a delight. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Let me think. I'm trying to think of any other questions. I had so many, and now that I'm on the spot, and we started rambling about politics and shit like that. It got a little bit sidetracked. Fuck it. We're just gonna go to the same questions you'd ask when you're fucking trying to bang a Tinder girl. Favorite food?
Nachos? Am I supposed to answer as a Tinder girl? I don't understand.
No, it's gonna be like that. Nachos. I remember I had asked you about
nachos. Is not a very fuckable answer, but nachos will remain the answer.
I mean, I've eaten nachos plenty of times after having sex. So ice cream nachos were legitimate a thing?
Yes.
It's something you had read about. How would one make ice cream nachos? Do you use graham crackers as the nachos, or would you with ice cream dip? Or
that was not part of it, but I should now. Oh my God, got to reevaluate.
Oh yeah. We'll come back to that one.
We'll come back to that one.
Authors. What's your most influential authors?
Oh, Hunter S. Thompson taught me a lot about how to just be who you were on the page and never come back to edit. Chuck Palahniuk taught me how to be honest about some of those things. There are others, but they start to blend at some point. Like it's just read as much as you can is always a good version of this.
Yeah, that's a good point. You like Vonnegut at all? Have you ever read any Vonnegut, like Cat's Cradle and shit like that?
I have started 3 of Vonnegut's books, and I never see it all the way through to the end. I'm always like, I like this, and then I just never make the time. But like, I have a job right now where I have to read like 8 books a week, so I get enough books in. I still get in the books I wish I could have read.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you do for
Everyone do better in school.
I can tell you that especially. It's one of those weird things that I wonder if we're ever gonna eventually get a generation of kids who actually heed the simple warnings of parents, because every generation of kids, even myself, my dad was like, brush your teeth. I'm like, fuck you, dad, you weren't in my life. Hey, focus in school, because life gets really hard if you don't have an education. Fuck you, I'll figure it out. All those things. Then you get out of them, you're like, yeah, why didn't I do good in school? It's so fucking
Right.
obvious. I mean, that guy that was beating his dick off in front of the 7-Eleven and trying to get all the local pigeons to lick his fingers is fucking, he's not doing well. So why don't I fucking, like, what I mean? It's one of those things where it's so blatantly obvious, but you have to be a cunt. You know what I mean? You have to be a cunt when you're a teenager. All right. What was the worst stand-up show you had ever done?
It was a show at a sex club. It was a group sex club. So like all the hallways and all the rooms were filled with various tables and devices and stuff. And some way through the maze to the back, there was a stage and there was a storytelling show there. And like, I was very excited by that. But like, I had heard that like, this was here once a month and everyone understood like the show was here and it would just be fun and nice. And like, people came out and it was sort of just wacky for being there. And like one or two people into the show, like you noticed that the audience was leaving and going other places and coming back and things were happening. And so by the time I went up as like the seventh person, I was like, I don't think anyone's listening anymore. And I can hear what they're doing instead, but I can't leave because in order to leave, I would have to walk through the maze of what they are doing. And I don't want to enter back into the labyrinth to find my way back to my car. So instead, I'll just talk on stage now. But there was still like one guy in the audience that had just shown up just to be like an audience member for the show, and it wasn't a regular. It was a storytelling show, not a stand show. So I wasn't going to do like crowd work. So it's like, what story can I tell you right now that would make it worth your time to have been here tonight, but to have stayed here instead of going around to the corner to where the strobe light and the fucking is? Like, I don't know how to make up for what's happening so close that we can smell it and hear it, but have to in polite society pretend that we don't know it's there. Like, so where are you from? Like,
did you find it? Did you find that common ground?
I think I told a story about being in grade school and he kind of nodded and chuckled a little bit, and then it was like, well, all right. And there was no host to give the mic back to at the end of it. I thought she would come back. I was like, no, so we're just all stuck here.
Yeah.
This is where I die.
Put the mic down and then was just like, all right, well, this is it.
Put it in the stand, went back to my seat and waited. Somebody else came out after a while. I was like, where have you been? I don't want to know. You were somewhere. It's fine.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, that sounds like not what I was expecting at all. So that's a pretty good story. Well, you're married, so if you had to give people out there, I was married at one point, but we're not going to talk about that. If you had to give people out there, seeing as in my hometown, and especially with this generation, it seems to be very prevalent that people meet, and within the 2 months, they're like, all that, hey, sweetie, all that shit that people do when they're in love, like, gradually build the relationship of love, and then get married so many years later, and then have kids so many years later after that. Let's just get all that shit done in the first 6 months, and then we can be divorced.
Just do it right away. Just move in immediately.
Seriously. So what advice would you give to couples that are married? Like, if you just gave a piece of advice, or even people that are worried about being married, what do you think is the key to a good marriage that you've seen through your time period in the longevity of your relationship?
It's a real good question. I think that the best answer is so like you identified. I think I've been a serial monogamist. Pretty immediately moved from one relationship to the other, ask people to move in, do that sort of thing. The thing that made this one different was that my now wife was just brutally fucking honest from day one, and I wasn't ready for that. And I think that maybe not if you're aware that we're all on this accelerated rate, to not worry about somebody's feelings when you're talking about like the day-to-day shit. Like, hey, how are we going to pay for this? No. I don't want like a fancy answer. Like, I don't want a poem or roses. How are we paying the gas bill? Like that sort of thing. Like, I think that that's a practical good version that, like, if you apply that to everything else, like, either you figure out very quickly, like, oh, we're not compatible, or you figure out, like, we will make this work. That's fine. Just be a dick. Everybody be a dick to the people that you love about the things that are practical. Go be a nice person and obviously care about them. But when it comes to the details, just be brutally honest. Don't try to, like, dress anything up. None of us have time for it anymore. We're millennials and the earth is on fire.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That was a beautiful answer, dude. That was not that was not what I was expecting at all, but that's absolutely 100% true. I've always said I think the key to a good relationship, which has been hard until now to find someone that reciprocated this, was to really, if you are, and this is to people, I know I'm only 26, but I truly do hold this as a good truth. If you ever feel like starting an argument, and this, you can put this, it's applicable to all situations in life, ask yourself, is this really fucking worth it? Like, is this really worth the fucking argument? We've been having a good day, and then right. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a dumb example. I left my socks on top of the fucking like counter or something like that, and I want to start a fight with somebody. Like, that's what I think is the number one goal. What is your opinion on AI? Weird segue, but I told you I was awful at segues. I told you I was fucking shit cunt at segues.
This is such a weird way to end the podcast. How do I feel about AI? I hope it replaces us so fast. We've really fucked this up. Somebody else that's smarter than us needs to come in. Please, Skynet, come save us.
I hope
Didn't know that Terminator was going to end that way.
Like a cool Ghost in the Shell type of situation where we're just like gradually becoming less human, more machine in a badass kind of way.
Someone take over.
Fair fucking enough. All right, man. Well, I'm sure you got to get sleep. Do you have work in the morning?
I do indeed, Jackson. Thank you so much for having me on.
Dude, seriously, man. I wish I could shake your hand because you really made a dream come true for me. I love you, man.
I'll see you soon. We're not that far away.
All right, man. You take it easy.
Toodles.